The house was quiet, almost unbearably so. She sat in her chair, hands folded on her lap, staring at the floor. Each creak of the wooden floorboard seemed louder than usual, echoing the emptiness that filled her chest. She had lived a long life, full of work and care for others. Yet now, in her later years, she felt unseen. Every visit had grown shorter, every call more infrequent. It was as if the world had moved on, leaving her behind. Her mind whispered doubts that had grown louder over the months. Was she too much for others? Did she only weigh them down with her needs, her presence, her frailty? Tears formed unbidden, sliding slowly down her cheeks. She did not try to stop them. The grief was too heavy for restraint. She let them fall silently, a small, quiet rebellion against the sense of worthlessness that pressed in. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, the shadows in the corners of the room growing longer, pressing closer. She wondered if anyone at all, truly cared for her anymore. And yet, beneath the fear, a tiny whisper stirred deep in her heart, a faint hope she barely recognized. Somewhere, somehow, she longed to believe that she was not entirely alone. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift back to earlier years, when her hands were always busy and her presence was needed. She remembered cooking for family gatherings, offering advice to neighbors, helping friends in quiet ways that went unnoticed. Those days were filled with a sense of purpose. She had felt valued, respected, and loved for the work she did and the kindness she shared. Each task, however small, had carried meaning. Now those memories felt distant, like echoes in an empty hall. The recognition she had once known seemed like a fading light, one she feared she would never feel again. Her heart ached as she recalled the smiles of gratitude she used to receive. Each memory was bittersweet, comforting, but also a reminder of what had been lost. She traced the lines on her hands, once strong, now trembling with age, and wondered if they still had value in this new, quieter life. Yet even in the sorrow, a small flicker of pride lingered, a quiet recognition that she had once made a difference. Calls grew less frequent, visits shortened, invitations stopped arriving. Faces that had once been familiar now passed by, with polite nods and empty smiles. She was there, but invisible. The loneliness deepened each day, pressing down like a heavy fog. She longed for conversation, for shared laughter, for a gentle presence that reminded her she mattered. Even her family seemed preoccupied, their attention absorbed by their own lives. She wanted to speak, to reach out, but she feared being an inconvenience, a burden no one had the patience for. Her heart ached with the quiet sting of absence. She remembered birthdays passed without a visitor, meals eaten alone, evenings stretching endlessly in silence. The house, once warm with voices and light, now felt empty, oppressive in its stillness. Every familiar corner seemed to whisper her solitude, and yet, deep down, she yearned for connection, for a reminder that she was still part of a world that had once loved her. Simple chores became mountains she struggled to climb. The act of sweeping the floor, preparing a meal, or folding laundry felt like an impossible burden. Each movement reminded her of her age, her limitations, and her solitude. Her chest felt heavy, as if the weight of her life pressed upon her all at once. She longed for rest, but sleep offered little relief from the ache in her soul. Even small interactions, like greeting a neighbor or answering the phone, demanded energy she barely possessed. Every task reminded her of her fragility and her dependence on others. The house, quiet and dim, seemed to conspire with her fatigue. Shadows clung to corners, and silence amplified the heaviness she carried. She sat often in her chair, letting her body slump, tears forming quietly at the edges of her eyes. Her heart felt burdened not only by grief, but by the persistent thought that she was a burden herself. Yet somewhere in that heaviness, a faint hope lingered, a whisper that she might not always feel this weight. Late at night, when the world was asleep, she pressed her hands together and whispered words that were barely audible. "Lord, am I still useful? Do I still matter?" Her voice trembled, fragile and uncertain. She had prayed many times before, but now her words felt small, almost futile against the emptiness that surrounded her. Tears slid down her cheeks as she poured out her heart, asking for reassurance, for a sign that her life had meaning beyond her age and weakness. The silence of the night answered nothing, and yet she continued, clinging to the hope that her whispers might reach someone who truly saw her. Each word was heavy with both fear and longing, a simple, vulnerable plea for worth and significance. And in that quiet, despite the absence of sound or response, she felt a subtle stirring within, a faint, almost imperceptible sense that she was not entirely alone. Her body ached in ways that words could scarcely capture. Knees stiffened with each step, hands trembled when lifting even light objects, and her back protested the simplest movement. Every ache reminded her of her age, of the years that had passed, of the strength that once was. The fragility of her body mirrored the fragility she felt inside. She tried to ignore it, to move as she had in younger days, but even routine chores became tiring, each task a small mountain to climb. Sitting in her chair, she rubbed her hands together, wincing at the stiffness. Pain was not just physical. It was a reminder that she depended on others now, that she could no longer carry life alone. Yet even in these moments, she held on to quiet determination, forcing herself to rise, to continue, even when her body seemed unwilling. And somewhere beneath the weariness, she sensed a small glimmer of strength still present, fragile but unbroken. Her thoughts turned inward, accusing. Was she too much? Too slow, too tired, too weak? The thought of being a burden gnawed quietly at her, unrelenting. She remembered times when she had needed help, times when she had felt dependent. Each memory now carried a weight, a reminder that she might be imposing, draining, or unwanted. The guilt grew quietly, shadow-like, seeping into her moments of rest and even her moments of prayer. She feared she had failed those who had once loved her. Even small mistakes now felt monumental. Forgetting a name, misplacing a dish, leaving a light on, each became a source of inner judgment. Her heart sank further with each thought, the shadow of guilt merging with loneliness to create a nearly tangible weight. And yet, beneath it all, a faint whisper persisted, a quiet intuition that she was still loved, even if she could not yet feel it fully. Anger, subtle and unwelcome, began to surface. She resented the family who had drifted away, the friends who no longer visited, the world that seemed to move on without her. It was not a loud, fiery anger, but a quiet resentment that gnawed at her heart. She had given so much, loved so fully, and yet now she felt overlooked, forgotten. She closed her eyes, trying to breathe through it, to let it pass, but it lingered stubbornly, a shadow over the small comforts she had left. She questioned the fairness of it all, the silence, the absence, the casual neglect that marked her days. It was a bitter companion, unwanted, but persistent. Yet even as resentment whispered, there was another voice, quieter, telling her that bitterness could not be the final word. And in that small tension, she felt a subtle turning, a tiny opening for something gentler to enter her heart. Night after night, she let herself weep. The tears came quietly, filling the darkness with the language her voice could not speak. Each drop carried longing, fear, loneliness, and sorrow all at once. Her pillow soaked quietly, her body shaking with the release she could not voice. These were tears for years past, for connections lost, for the feeling that life had left her behind. The house remained still, as though it too were mourning with her. The walls held her sobs like a silent witness, bearing testimony to her pain. Each night she thought the grief might lessen, but it returned with persistent intensity, a tide that refused to ebb. Yet in the quiet of her tears there was a strange intimacy. She allowed herself to feel fully, to release fully, even if there was no one to witness it. And somewhere, hidden beneath the raw sadness, a fragile seed of hope stirred, a hint that her suffering might not be without purpose. She pressed her hands together, whispering words that trembled with vulnerability. "Do I matter, Lord?" The question was small, simple, yet carried the weight of her entire being. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but the plea came from deep within, from the part of her heart that longed to be seen. Tears slid down her cheeks as she admitted her fears, her doubts, and her exhaustion. She did not ask for answers or grand signs, only reassurance that her life held value. The room remained silent, yet she felt something shift within. Though no sound returned, a subtle warmth filled the emptiness around her. She allowed herself to sit with the question, letting it linger in the quiet night, trusting that her words had not fallen into void. And in that gentle surrender, a faint spark of hope stirred, small but undeniable. It began as a gentle warmth in her chest, soft and unassuming, almost like a whisper of sunlight through a window. She froze, unsure if she had imagined it. The sensation persisted, steady and quiet, as if someone invisible yet close was watching over her. She breathed slowly, feeling the weight of loneliness ease slightly. Her heart, so heavy before, felt lighter, as if a protective hand rested over it. The presence did not speak, did not move, yet it comforted in ways words never could. Memories of fear and doubt surfaced, but now they felt distant, less sharp. The subtle presence seemed to hold them gently, acknowledging them without letting them dominate. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to lean into this quiet reassurance, feeling a sense of safety she had not known in months. In that silent embrace, she sensed that her life, her worth, and her pain were fully seen, fully known, and fully held. As she sat in the stillness, a gentle awareness washed over her. She could not see a figure, nor hear a voice, yet the certainty was undeniable. She was loved, fully and unconditionally. The weight of doubt began to lift, replaced by a soft conviction that her life had value beyond usefulness or appearances. She mattered. Her hands, once trembling, now rested calmly in her lap. Her heart, once tight with worry, softened. There was a quiet peace in knowing she was not invisible. Images of her past contributions and acts of kindness drifted through her mind. They were not forgotten. They were treasured, and she herself was treasured. The fear that had haunted her for months began to loosen its grip. Anxiety no longer ruled her thoughts, and in that gentle assurance she felt a profound intimacy, a quiet connection that did not need words to confirm her worth. The night's shadows no longer pressed in as heavily. The familiar fears, the fear of being a burden, of being forgotten, softened in the presence of unseen comfort. Her breathing, once shallow and tight, became steady. The tension that had gripped her shoulders eased, leaving a rare sensation of calm. Even her thoughts, usually restless with worry, slowed. She allowed herself to simply be, to feel safe, without effort, without expectation. The ache in her heart softened, replaced by a tender warmth that spread slowly, quietly, like sunlight touching cold earth. She realized that protection, care, and love did not always need to be spoken or shown outwardly. Sometimes they simply existed, invisible yet powerful. And in this softening, a trust began to form, a trust that she could lean into, a trust that she was fully seen and cherished. It was a sensation that went beyond words or sight, a deep, quiet comfort that seemed to wrap itself around her entire being. Her tears now carried a new quality, not only sorrow, but release, a sense of being understood, held, and valued. The heaviness she had carried for so long began to shift, settling gently, replaced by warmth that radiated from within. She imagined a presence near her, steady and unwavering, embracing the parts of her heart that had long been tender and broken. A soft peace wrapped around her like a cloak, quiet yet profoundly real, filling spaces in her soul she had feared empty forever. And in that embrace, she sensed the truth she had longed for. She was not a burden, she was precious, and she was cherished beyond measure. She thought of the countless ways she had poured love into the lives of others, teaching, nurturing, supporting, caring. Each act, no matter how small, had left a mark. Memories of family dinners, comforting words to friends, and moments of quiet guidance surfaced gently. She realized these things mattered, far beyond what she had imagined. Her heart, once burdened by doubt, now beat with the soft rhythm of recognition. She had mattered. She still mattered. The sense of being a burden dissolved as she embraced the truth. Her life had been, and continued to be, a gift to those around her. She touched her hands, seeing them not as fragile or weak, but as vessels of care and devotion. In that quiet realization, she smiled softly, feeling the warmth of her own worth permeate her spirit. The anxiety that had accompanied her every moment began to fade. Her breath deepened, slow and steady, carrying away the tension that had once gripped her body. She felt a profound calm settle over her, gentle and unwavering, as though an unseen hand pressed lightly upon her heart. The room, once oppressive in its silence, now seemed to hold her softly, its shadows softened by the light of her renewed spirit. Even the aches in her body seemed lighter, less urgent, as if the comfort within had begun to heal her entirely, not only her soul but her weary flesh. She lingered in this stillness, letting the quiet peace flow through her, moment by moment, breath by breath. And for the first time in what felt like years, she was still, wholly present, fully at rest in the assurance of being cherished. A small smile rose unbidden, delicate yet genuine, breaking through the long-held sorrow. She laughed softly, almost surprised at the sound, fragile but uncontainable. The joy was quiet, subtle, not boisterous, yet it carried a profound sense of life returning to her spirit. Even the simplest things brought delight. A bird landing on the windowsill, sunlight warming her face, the aroma of morning tea. Her heart, once weighed down by guilt and fear, now recognized these moments as evidence that she was not forgotten, not unseen. She allowed herself to savor each sensation, each smile, each breath, feeling the tender stirrings of renewed hope. The world had not changed, yet she had begun to awaken within it, fragile, tender, and alive. When she opened her eyes to a new day, she felt different. The heaviness of yesterday had softened. The light of morning seemed brighter, infused with quiet possibility. Her body moved more freely, her steps lighter, and her mind clearer. The burdens of yesterday remained, but they no longer defined her every moment. She looked out the window, noticing the gentle sway of the trees, the glint of dew on leaves, the ordinary beauty of a world still turning. A sense of purpose, subtle and warm, stirred within her. She imagined small acts she could do today, small ways to live fully, even within her limits. For the first time in months, she felt capable, present, and ready to embrace the day without fear or hesitation. And in that morning light, she recognized the quiet miracle, a heart renewed, a spirit lifted, and life awaiting her touch. She prepared her breakfast slowly, savoring each sip of tea, noticing the warmth of the cup in her hands. Even simple routines felt meaningful, as if life itself had returned. She called a friend, her voice steady, sharing a smile over the line, reconnecting with the world she had once felt apart from. A small walk in the garden became an act of celebration, a gentle affirmation of her presence, her vitality, her worth. She tended the plants, watered the flowers, and marveled at the tiny signs of growth and life, seeing herself reflected in their persistence and beauty. Even minor interactions, once exhausting, now carried joy, as she embraced being both needed and valued once more. And in each act, she felt a deepening awareness. Her life, her presence, her love still mattered profoundly. Tears had dried, but the warmth of her heart remained. She was no longer haunted by doubt or the weight of being a burden. She recognized the enduring truth. Her life had value, not dependent on others' recognition, but affirmed by the one who had always remained. Every act of kindness she had given, every moment of care and love, had left an eternal mark, proof that she mattered, deeply and irreplaceably. Even in solitude, she felt accompanied. Even in silence, she felt heard. The presence that had quietly comforted her now felt permanent, a steady companion for all her days. Her spirit was lighter, her heart at peace, her soul quietly singing the song of worth and love. And as she moved through the day, she carried with her a profound awareness. She was cherished, she was valuable, and she was never alone.